They stood in front of the chair like guards. "You're not mentioned in the will," Randall said flatly, folding his arms. Trevor added, "It's just for immediate family." I looked at my sons, two grown men in tailored suits, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. Immediate family. Gave them life. The room was cold despite the elegant curtains and polished oak table. I stood at the entrance holding the navy folder I'd brought with me like a shield. Inside was every paper I needed. Not just copies but originals. But at that moment no one cared what I held. Not the attorney, not the paralegal, not even the few other distant relatives who barely looked up. "I received a letter," I said quietly, "from Winslow and Chambers. It had this address and date." Randall. "Off. They must have made a mistake. We're handling the estate now. Marlene appointed us last fall. She didn't have children. I'm her sister." Trevor gave a half smile, the kind he used to wear when trying to explain tech I'd never asked about. "Mom, look. We're not in this version. We can explain it later. For now, just please don't make a scene." I looked down at the floor. Worn velvet carpet, beige with flecks of green, a stain just by the sideboard. "Coffee, maybe." I let the silence hang then. Step forward. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said carefully. "I'm here because Marlene wanted me to be." "You're not on the list," said the secretary behind the desk. Nameplate said K. Mendes. She looked young, uncomfortable. I didn't blame her. "She would have wanted me here," I said again. "Not to them this time, but to the space itself." I took another step forward, reached into my folder and handed a document to Ms. Mendes. "Please give this to Mr. Harold," I said. "I believe it supersedes any amendments made last fall." Ms. Mendes blinked, then took the paper and walked toward the door at the end of the room. Randall started to say something, but Trevor pulled at his arm. "Let's just wait," Trevor muttered. I sat in the chair they'd blocked. Neither of them stopped. The folder still lay on my lap, but I no longer held it like a shield. Held it like proof. I hadn't planned to speak first. I'd imagined this moment, the ceremony, the formal tone, the reading, a solemn affair as it should be. Not this petty gatekeeping. I looked across the table at a cousin I hadn't seen in 20 years. He gave me a faint nod. I returned it. The door opened. Mr. Harold stepped in. Tall, gray-bearded, always a hint of dust on his jacket like old books. He held the document Ms. Mendes had given him, flipping through it with deliberate slowness. "Mrs. Delacroix," he said. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Randall bristled. We were told this was a closed session. Mr. Harold ignored him. "This concerns joint filings from 2008. If you'll follow me." I rose and followed him down the hallway, my legs steady, despite the weight I felt in my chest. His office smelled like cedar. There were no chairs, only a high counter. He laid the paper flat. "This is unexpected," he said. "You and Marlene executed a mutual will in 2008, witnessed, notarized, and filed in the county record. It predates the revision the boys submitted. She insisted on it. I said she didn't trust anyone but me." He looked up. "Legally, it overrides the later changes unless revoked in your presence. Was it?" "Well." He nodded once. "Then you are the sole beneficiary. Entire estate, house, land, accounts. Was. The boys don't know. They suspect, but no, they don't." He exhaled slowly. "Would you like me to inform them?" "No, I Let them hear it during the reading with everyone else. He studied me, then closed the file. You'll stay for the reading? Yes, I said, now that I've been allowed to sit. When I returned to the room, neither of my sons looked at me, but I saw their postures change. They knew something had shifted, and for once I didn't feel like the one waiting to be let in. The house was quiet when I got home that evening, but not the comforting kind of quiet. It was the kind that made you feel like even the walls were holding their breath. I hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen. The light over the sink flickered. Had been doing that for months, but I hadn't bothered fixing it. No one else was coming in here but me. I boiled water for tea, even though my stomach was too tight to drink anything. Habit. There was a time this kitchen was full. Voices. Randall arguing with Trevor over cereal. Marlene laughing from the doorway. Derek, my husband, clinking his mug against mine just to make me smile. Before work. That was another life. Derek died 22 years ago, just after the New Year. Heart failure. He was gone before I could get the ambulance to the house. I remember sitting on the porch in my robe, snow falling into my slippers, phone dangling from my hand. Randall was 23. Trevor was barely 20. They were devastated for a week. Then things turned practical. Who gets the car? Who pays the mortgage? Who handles the insurance? They'd stepped into adulthood the way some people step onto a moving train. Fast, loud, careless. First I didn't mind. I was proud of them. Randall got into real estate. Started making decent money within 2 years. He was always charming, could talk his way into anything. Trevor stayed local, got into mechanics, opened a garage with a friend from high school, said he liked working with his hands. Helped them both. I always helped. When Randall's first investment deal fell through and he needed to bridge the gap before the next one, I wrote him a. When Trevor's partner skipped town with their business funds, I dipped into my pension. No questions. Just love. That's what mothers do. When Marlene started getting sick, when the letters stopped being funny and started repeating themselves, when she couldn't remember what she'd said 5 minutes earlier, I was the one who found her a doctor. Drove her to every appointment. She hated the idea of assisted living, so I turned the guest room into her own place. She's not our responsibility, Trevor had said one day when I asked him to pick up her prescriptions. You're her sister. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. But Marlene had always known the truth. People say things like that when they believe they've already claimed their share. She never had children, never married. Said she had enough family to manage. Thank you. She was witty, sharp. Wore perfume even when she didn't leave the house. One night, maybe a year after she'd moved in, she asked if we could write our wills together. People change their minds when there's money on the table, she said. Let's not give them the chance. We met with a lawyer, Mr. Harold's predecessor, and had everything done by the book. 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, each of us naming the other sole beneficiary. I remember thinking it was more ceremony than necessity, but I went along with it. Years passed. Marlene's mind faded. But she still smiled when I read her poetry. Still called me baby sister. Even when she couldn't recall what day it was. She died on a Thursday morning. In her sleep. Peaceful. I sat with her for 2 hours before calling anyone, not out of denial but respect. Some people deserve a soft goodbye. The funeral was small, just family, a few neighbors. Randall gave a speech that sounded rehearsed. Trevor stood stiffly, hands in pockets. Neither of them had visited her more than twice in the last year. But after the service, things changed. They both started asking about the estate. Randall called more often. Trevor came by unannounced. They offered to help. You shouldn't handle this all alone. Let them. I watched, waited. When the letter from Winslow and Chambers came in the mail, I didn't tell them. It was addressed to me. Full name. Correct address, no mistake. Then last week, I overheard Randall on the phone while he thought I was outside. She doesn't need to be there, he said. We've got the final draft. It's all lined up. I went upstairs, opened the safe, and took out the Navy folder. Everything they thought was lined up had been signed away years ago. Still, part of me hoped I was wrong. Hoped they were just being careless, not cruel. But today proved otherwise. Today they blocked my seat. Marlene and I were born 11 months apart, almost to the day. Irish twins. People called us back then. I was the quiet one, always reading, always watching. She was the spark, the one with red ribbons in her hair and too many opinions for a girl her age. Shared a bedroom until we were 16. She taught me how to fake a headache to skip school and how to lie convincingly if you ever got caught sneaking pie from the fridge. I taught her how to budget, how to write a proper thank you letter, how to keep secrets without breaking under pressure. Our parents died young. Car crash on the interstate a week before my 19th birthday. Marlene was 18. We were alone in the house we'd grown up in. Two girls with no compass but each other. We sold the place within a year and moved into a rental. Took jobs, paid bills, figured things out. I met Derek at the library of all places. He was fixing the heating unit. Said my voice sounded like music when I read aloud to the children. I said he was trying too hard. He said, trying's half the battle. I married him a year later. Marlene never married, but she lived a full life. She traveled when she could, Greece, Canada, even Japan once, taught English, managed an art gallery, worked in radio. Her stories never ended where you thought they would. Every time she came home for Christmas or for my birthday or just because she brought something odd, a stone shaped like a heart, an apron with embroidered frogs, a jar of pickled onions from a street market in Dublin. The boys adored her when they were young. Aunt Mar, they'd yell, running to meet her at the door. She'd twirl them around, let them stay up past bedtime, feed them candy before dinner. Derek would wink at me and say, "She's not here to raise them. She's here to remind them life can be loud." That changed over the years. Once Randall got into college, he stopped showing up when she visited. Trevor followed suit, though with less sharpness. They grew tired of her. She was too much. I watched it happen like watching a faucet drip slowly then, constantly until one day you realize the whole sink's wet. When she moved in after her diagnosis, mild cognitive decline, then early-stage Alzheimer's. Neither of them offered help. Not even a visit. Too busy, they'd say. Marlene knew, even in her forgetfulness, she knew. One day, as I brushed her hair, she said softly, "They'll come when I'm gone. Watch them like pigeons at a park bench, only pecking when there's something to take." It wasn't bitterness, just recognition. She said it the way you say it might rain tomorrow. Her decline was steady but slow. First she forgot how to use the microwave. Then she started misplacing her keys. Then she began introducing me to visitors as my neighbor instead of her sister. I never corrected her. Would have been the point. But there were moments when she'd look at me and her eyes would spark and she'd say, May, if I ever forget who I am, just remind me who you are. Promised. I would, and I did. I took care of her until the very end. It wasn't always easy. There were nights she wandered outside and I had to chase her barefoot down the sidewalk. There were mornings I found cereal in the freezer and milk in the cupboard. But I never lost patience. Because love isn't just about joy. It's about holding the line when someone else is drifting. Near the end she stopped speaking. Just small hums, sometimes a nod. But when I sat on the edge of her bed and held her hand, she always turned toward me. Day before she passed, she squeezed my hand twice. Once for hello, once for goodbye. I didn't cry when she died. Not immediately. Grief has its own clock. But now, weeks later, I feel her absence. In strange places. The extra teacup I forget to put away. The sound of wind. Chimes that no longer move. And today in that room, when Randall stood in front of me like a bouncer and said, "You're not mentioned here," I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because if Marlene had been in that room, whole, sharp, standing, she would have said, "You boys are about to learn what it means to underestimate a woman who's already lost everything but her pride." That's why I brought the folder, not to stir drama. Not to win, but because I promised my sister I'd remind them who I was. And I intend to keep that promise. The morning after the will reading, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold and the envelope still sealed in front of me. It held a certified copy of the original will, the one Marlene and I signed together, notarized, witnessed, and stored for years in my fireproof box, untouched. I hadn't opened it since. I didn't need. I knew every word by heart. A dull ache had settled behind my eyes. Not a headache, just a kind of weight. The kind you carry when you know something irreversible has started. Wasn't angry. Not yet. I was noticing how Randall hadn't called. Not even a text. Trevor either. The silence wasn't accidental. It was strategic. They needed time to regroup, to find a way to spin what had happened in that office. Or maybe they were waiting for me to die of embarrassment. That had happened once before. When Derek passed, I'd made the mistake of trusting Randall with the estate paperwork. He was the older son, more responsible. Thought. Within 2 weeks, he'd convinced me to sign over the deed to the family home. Just until probate clears. Mom, it's simpler for taxes. I signed, not understanding the implications. 2 years later, I had to beg him not to refinance it under his name. He said I was being dramatic. That was the first time I felt it. The shift, the tilt from mom to obstacle. Trevor was more subtle. He didn't ask for control. He asked for sympathy. When he needed a new transmission, it was just a short loan. When his third girlfriend left him, I was the one who cleaned out the fridge and scrubbed his apartment while he cried on the couch. He'd never yell at me. He'd just forget to say thank you. And slowly over the years I stopped offering, not out of malice, just preservation. The envelope on the table gleamed in the morning light. I reached out, opened the flap, and slid the papers onto the table. My handwriting was there beside Marlene's on the last page. Firm. Clean, no trembling in the pen. We'd been so sure, so united. This document is irrevocable unless jointly dissolved with written consent of both parties, it read. She never revoked it and I never wanted to. Even as her mind unraveled, she still trusted me to remember for the both of us. Now the trust was written in legal ink. I sat there a long time reading the pages as if they were a letter from her. In a way they were. After a while I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in nearly a decade. Winslow and Chambers, this is Dana. Speaking. Hello, dear. Could I speak with Mr. Harold, please? It's May Dequa. One moment, Mrs. Deloqua. He picked up on the third ring. May, I was just about call you. Is that so? Asked, letting the edge in my voice show. I've reviewed the documentation. Solid. Your claim is not only legitimate, it takes precedence. You are the sole legal heir. The other will, frankly, should not have been processed without consulting the earlier agreement. So it's done. Done. He confirmed. Filed. Notice with the registrar. The estate is being transferred to your name. The house, the land, the investment account. Everything listed in the 2008 will. You should expect a formal confirmation by the end of next week. I thanked him and hung up. Then I stared out the window. The dogwood tree Marlene planted in 1995 was blooming again, pale pink. Blossoms stretching like arms into the air. I'd always wondered why she chose the tree. Said it reminded her of something delicate but defiant. That day I understood the house was too quiet. Not the silence of peace, the silence of anticipation, like the second before a doorbell rings. And I knew they would come. Not today but soon. They would come with apologies, explanations, justifications, all dressed as concern. They would come with flowers they didn't choose and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They would say things like, "We were confused and it's not what you think." And I would nod, because I've learned that nodding often tells more truth than words. That's when I made my decision, not about revenge. That was never my goal. But clarity. This wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making sure they never again mistook my silence for weakness. I reached for my notepad, wrote down a name, then a second, then a third. A plan was beginning to form. One that would take patience and precision. And me, fully awake, fully present, fully unwilling to be ignored. Not anymore. I didn't tell anyone I was going to see a lawyer. Not that day. Let them think I was still sitting in my kitchen, stunned, wounded, waiting for the phone to ring. Let them believe I was curled up in some armchair, looking at old photo albums, whispering their names through tears. Let them believe it, because that's the version of me they were most comfortable with. The quiet woman who gave, forgave, and stepped back without asking for space at the table. But I wasn't walking into Harold's office for tears or pity. I had a folder in my handbag and a list of names on my notepad, and I had one very clear goal. Mr. Harold looked up from his desk, surprised. "May," he said, standing. "You didn't need an appointment, but I'm glad you came." "I want to formalize the transfer," I said, sitting without waiting to be invited. "All of it. I want the titles, the bank assets, and the documents updated. And I want protections in place." He blinked. "Protections?" "Yes, legal locks. I don't want either of my sons accessing a cent of this estate. Not through proxy, not through power of attorney, not even through charm." Pause. "Especially not through charm." Harold cleared his throat, reached for his pen. "We can draft a restriction clause. You're within your rights, and the property titles can be updated to reflect sole ownership. That process takes a few weeks. I'd like to move on the accounts immediately. There's too much liquid cash sitting vulnerable." "Understood." He opened a folder, pulled up forms. He filled them out. I looked around the room. His office smelled of paper and lemon oil. Not expensive, not fancy, but it was steady, reliable, like Derek's workbench used to be, full of tools that did what they promised. I also want to open a trust, I said, interrupting his pen. A living trust for someone who actually still treats me like a human being. Do you have a beneficiary in mind? He nodded. Name's Claire. Claire Whitlow, my cousin's granddaughter. She's 26. Works nights at the city library. Visits me every 2 weeks like clockwork. Never asked me for a dime. He looked up, slightly amused. And you want to make her the successor to Marlene's estate. Not all of it, but a portion. Enough to set her free from struggle. Enough to let her breathe. He smiled gently. That's generous of you. No, I said. It's appropriate. We worked in silence for some time. Signed where needed, read every clause, asked questions. Mr. Harold never rushed. That I appreciated. When everything was in motion, I sat. There's one more thing, I said. He raised his brow. I want a clause in my own will that if either of my sons contests any part of these arrangements after my passing, they are to be disinherited completely. Harold didn't flinch. You want to include a no contest clause. He jotted it down without another word. Some might say that was petty, harsh. But people who say that have never looked into the eyes of their own child and seen calculation instead of love. I left the office with a small stack of paperwork and a strange sense of calm. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It was more like the quiet after a storm when the air is still charged but the sky is finally open. I took the long way home. Drove past the elementary school where I'd taught for nearly 30 years. The playground was empty, swings swaying in the breeze. Used to walk that way with Randall in one hand and Trevor in the other, their jackets half-zipped and their cheeks red from the cold. They'd fight over who got to push the doorbell. Now they wouldn't even push open a door for me. At home, the answering machine was blinking. 2 messages. Press play. First was from Trevor. Hey, Mom. Just wanted to check in. Hope you're okay. Randall and I were talking and we think maybe we should all sit down soon. Clear the air. Get things free. Second was Randall. Mother, I think there's been some confusion regarding the will. It's possible there was a clerical issue. We're working on clarifying things, but we'd appreciate it if you could forward any documents you brought to the meeting for transparency. Transparency. I almost laughed. That's the word people use when they're trying to see through you, not with you. I deleted both messages. Then I sat down and wrote 2 letters. One to Randall, one to Trevor. Short, calm, clear. I received your messages. I'm not interested in discussing the estate at this time. All matters are being handled through my attorney. Please direct any further questions to him. Mother. No apologies, no warmth. They'd get the message. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And when a woman wakes up after years of giving, of softening her edges to fit into the corners others carve for her, she doesn't go back to sleep. Not ever again. The next morning the doorbell rang at 9:07. I was still in my robe, coffee in. And through the window, I saw a silver car parked haphazardly at the curb. Randall's. He hadn't parked in front of my house in years. Always too busy. Always on the other side of town. I didn't answer right away. Let him be. The second ring came faster, sharper. He was always impatient when the world didn't move on his schedule. When I opened the door, he gave a smile I recognized from every family Christmas after Derek died. The kind of smile that didn't quite touch his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said, like we hadn't just stared each other down across a lawyer's desk 2 days ago. I was in the area, I raised an eyebrow. At 9 a.m. on a Saturday. He laughed like I was joking. May I come in? I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to see how far he'd go. He walked in like he still remembered the layout. Looked around like something had shifted, though he couldn't name what it had, but not the furniture. I didn't offer coffee. He sat on the edge of the armchair, fingers laced, suit jacket too formal for a drop-by. I wanted to talk, he began. There seems to have been some miscommunication with Marlene's documents. Trevor and I were blindsided. Were you? I asked softly. He paused. Oh yes. No one told us there was a prior will, one that overrides the new one. 'Cause you didn't ask. He blinked. You assumed, I continued. You assumed. She left it all to you. That I would sit quietly, nodding along like I always did. I wouldn't put it that way. No, you wouldn't. I folded my hands in my lap. But I would, and I just did. Pause. That followed was thick with things neither of us said. Then he leaned forward. Mom, we're family. We should be on the same page here. We can fix this. We can find a solution. His voice had that lilt again, that edge of persuasion. You're very good at what you do, Randall. Selling people things. I'm not trying to sell you. You sold me the first time I interrupted when you said I needed to sign over the house for taxes. He shut his mouth, looked down. There it was. I'm not angry, said. That's not what this is. I'm done. I've made arrangements. Everything is being handled legally, and if you try to challenge it, you'll be disinherited from anything I still control. He looked up. You're really going to cut us out? I'm going to stop rewarding neglect. He sat back, and for the first time in years he had nothing say. Trevor showed up 2 days later unannounced. Not in a suit like his brother, but in his usual jeans and oil-stained jacket. He didn't knock at first, just stood on the porch, shifting from foot to foot like a boy waiting to be called inside. I watched him through the curtain for a full minute before I opened the door. He smiled sheepishly. It had been years since he'd called me that. Here for a chat, or you need something fixed? Yes. He scratched his neck. Maybe both. I stepped aside. He walked in, took off his boots without me asking. A detail Randall had forgotten. Sat at the kitchen table like he used to, when he was broke and trying to avoid admitting it. Made tea. Old habits. Me. Sat in silence while it steeped. You know, he said finally. I didn't know about the old will. Randall handled everything with the lawyers. I just trusted him. I stirred my tea. You always did. Guess I shouldn't have. I looked at him. He seemed tired, older. Then I remembered, even with the same boyish mouth. But I knew better than to mistake fatigue for repentance. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, slid it across the table. I don't want money, Ma. That's not why I'm here. This is everything you loaned me. All the numbers. I made a list. I know I can't pay it back all at once, but I want to. That stopped me. Not because of the gesture. I knew how people like to offer. Just enough to appear noble, but because of the math, every number was right. Down to the $50 I'd slipped him for a tow truck 6 years ago. Picked up the paper. You kept track. He nodded. Always meant to make it right. I just didn't know how to say it. And now you do. I guess watching Randall scramble over something that wasn't his made me think. I let the silence hang between us. I was angry, he added. At the reading, at you, at Marlene, at everything, but I wasn't surprised. Not really. Why not? Because you're not stupid, Ma. You were never stupid. I think maybe we just counted on you acting like you were. I looked down at the steam rising from my cup. He wasn't wrong. It wasn't that they believed I didn't know better. It's that they believed I'd never speak up even if I did. I want to earn back your trust, Trevor said quietly. Then don't fight the will. Said. Don't hire lawyers. Don't let Randall talk you into anything. Leave it. Let it be what it is. He nodded slowly. Can do that. I didn't smile. I didn't soften. I just looked at him and said, good. And for once that was enough. I wasn't surprised when the letter from Randall's attorney arrived. I was surprised it took him this long. Came in a heavy white envelope with gold trim and a return address from a downtown firm I knew by reputation. Expensive, aggressive, and always dressed in courtesy. The kind of people who smile while sharpening the knife. The letter was polite. It used words like unfortunate discrepancy and pending clarification and amicable resolution. It requested a brief consultation to align understanding. It didn't mention money, but it didn't have to. Ended with, our client hopes to avoid formal litigation, but reserves the right to pursue all legal remedies should discussion fail. I read it once, then set it down. Somewhere deep in my chest something old stirred. Not fear, not quite. More like memory. A memory of the girl I once was sitting in a crowded office with Derek signing our first mortgage papers while a broker talked over me like I wasn't there. I hadn't spoken up then, not once. Nodded and signed and smiled when it was done. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table and called Mr. Harold. He picked up on the second ring. I was expecting your call, he said. You received Randall's letter. I did. Already drafted a response. Will it hold? It won't need to. The law holds. This is posturing. I exhaled slowly. Harold continued. They may try to bluff. They might even file something just to rattle you, but the will stands. It's unshakable. I believed him. Still that night I didn't sleep. I lay awake thinking not of the estate or the paperwork, but of Randall at 7 years old, standing at the edge of the pool afraid to jump. Of how I'd stood in the water with my arms open, promising I'd catch him. And I did every single time. There's no word for the ache of knowing someone you once caught without fail would now rather see you drown. The next morning I wrote Randall a letter, not through lawyers, not for or for him. It was 1 page typed. Randall, I received your attorney's letter. You've made your position clear. Here's mine. I will not rescind the will. I will not entertain compromise. I will not sit across from men who see me only as a delay in their plans. You've already taken enough from me. I'm simply choosing for the first time not to give you more. Mother, I printed it, folded it, placed it in an envelope with no return address. Drove to the post office myself and dropped it in the slot. I didn't feel victorious or vindicated. I felt like someone who'd set down a heavy box after carrying it too far for too long. When I got home, the light on the answering machine was blinking. Claire's voice. Hi, Aunt May. Hope this week hasn't been too heavy. I baked lemon squares, the kind you like, with extra zest. I'll bring them by tomorrow. Bae. Miss you. Smiled. For the first time in days I smiled. The world had narrowed, yes, but not in the way Randall thought. It hadn't closed in. It had distilled, reduced to only the people who mattered. And in that smallness there was finally space to breathe. Claire arrived the next afternoon with a tin of lemon squares and that soft knock she always used like she wasn't sure she was welcome even after all these years. I opened the door before she could knock. Wait. She smiled when she saw me. Still fast on your feet, I see. Still sweeter. Then you need to be, I said, stepping aside. She carried the tin with both hands like it was breakable. Inside the squares were wrapped in parchment, dusted with sugar, arranged in neat rows. Marlene would have liked that, the precision, the care. We sat at the table, same as always. I made us tea. Poured from the good pot, the one with the tiny crack under the handle. Blair never mentioned the crack. She just held her cup with both hands and listened. Have they called again? She asked after a while without naming who. Randall sent a lawyer. Trevor came by twice and I told them what needed. Sing. She nodded, eyes lowered, picking at the edge of the parchment. I'm proud of you. That caught me off guard. I almost laughed. Couldn't remember the last time someone said that to me. I looked at her. 26. Hair always uptight. Freckles across her nose. Kindness in every movement. She was Marlene's blood, not mine by birth. But family finds its way. You remind me of her sometimes, I said. Not the way you look, just the way you carry yourself. Claire's eyes softened. She was good to me. Even when she forgot my name, she still held my hand like she knew me. She did know you. Her heart never forgot. We sat a while longer drinking tea, eating lemon squares in silence. Then I told her, not everything but enough. That the estate was secure, that things were being transferred, that a trust was being prepared in her name, modest but stable, enough to give her options. She went still. You don't have to do that. I know, but why me? Because you come. Because you stay. Because you never once asked for anything and always brought something anyway. Your time, your presence, your lemon squares. She looked down, eyes. But I don't deserve that kind of trust. No one does, I said gently. That's the point of it. It's not earned. It's given. We finished our tea. She helped with the dishes even though I told her not to. And before she left, she turned at the door. If they ever try to make you feel small again, she said, just call me. I'll remind you who you are. I didn't cry until the door closed. Not because I was sad, because someone said they would stand by me, and I believed them. The call came late. I'd already turned off the lights, put on my nightgown, folded the day away like a worn blanket. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. At a certain age, you answer because you never know what might not wait till morning. Trevor. His voice was low, strained, not like the Trevor who used to call when his car broke down or when he'd forgotten his rent. This was something else. Are you all right? Yes. There was a long pause. Randall's filed a motion. He's contesting the will. Closed my eyes. Not from shock, just exhaustion. He says it's fraudulent, Trevor went on. Marlene was incompetent, that she was pressured. She wasn't. I know that. And let him fight, Ghost. Another silence. I don't know what to do, he said. Was threatening to sue me if I don't support him. That made me sit up straighter in bed. He thinks I'm siding with you. Which I guess I am, but he's furious. Says I'm betraying family. He nearly laughed. Betraying family. As if Randall hadn't redrawn the lines himself, as if loyalty was a tool he could pick up and drop as he pleased. Do what you need to protect yourself, I said calmly. But don't protect him at the cost of your spine. I'm not as strong as you think I am, Ma. Don't have to be strong. You just have to be clear. He didn't respond to that. You're not a boy anymore, Trevor. You don't need your brother's permission to be decent. He sighed. I wish Dad was here. I did too. Derek had a way of settling things, not with anger, but with presence. He'd say one sentence and people would stop talking. He believed in fairness but not fools. Dad would have told you to stop asking what Randall wants and ask yourself what's right. No. I also know you're scared. That's okay. Just don't let fear be the loudest voice in the room. We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing dramatic, no confessions, just the quiet trudging of two people, trying to find the edge of a mess someone else made. After we hung up, I stayed awake a long time staring at the ceiling. Randall wanted a war. Fine, he could have one. But not with fists, not with shouting, with silence, with boundaries. With a kind of dignity that doesn't flinch when insulted or bend when pushed. I made tea, sat by the window. The night was soft. Wind brushing the trees, stars peeking between clouds. Randall had no idea what it meant to be truly alone. But if he kept going, he'd learn. And it wouldn't be me who taught him. It would be the echo of every door he slammed shut. The house was quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that unnerves you. It was the kind that holds its own shape. Stillness earned, not imposed. I watered the plants. I straightened the Afghan on the back of the couch. I folded the laundry slowly, methodically, as if every shirt and towel deserved my full attention. I hadn't always been this way. Years ago, when Derek was alive and the boys were young, everything was movement. Cereal bowls half-rinsed, jackets tossed over chairs, school papers scattered across counters. Back then, silence was a luxury. Now it was my companion. It was almost noon when the mail arrived. Thick envelope, legal. Stationery, the courthouse seal stamped on the front. Randall had followed through. I opened it at the kitchen table with my letter opener, a small brass thing I'd had since 1974. A retirement gift from my first principal. Inside, a formal notification of Randall's motion to contest the estate. Accusations of undue influence. Allegations of mental incompetence on Marlene's part. A request to freeze asset transfer until a judge could review the will. There it was in black. A son suing his mother. I set the letter down. Not slowly, not dramatically, just set it down. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Harold. Received it, I said when he answered. So did I. What's next? I respond. Then we wait. Will it hold anything up? He hesitated. It might temporarily. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Let me know what you need. I already filed a response. It'll be fine, May. We're still on solid ground. After the call, I made a sandwich, ate it while standing. And I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out Marlene's favorite album. Thick leather, worn at the edges, full of photos from years most people had forgotten. There she was in 1986. Standing on a boat in a denim jacket 2 sizes too big. In 1992, grinning at a 4th of July barbecue, face smudged with charcoal. In 2003, standing beside me in front of the old library, holding hands. She didn't look incompetent. Looked alive. And now somehow she was being made into an argument. That was the cruelty of it. The way Randall wasn't just challenging me, but erasing her. Painting her final years as feeble. Her choices as tainted, her judgment as invalid, as if love made her less capable. As if trust made her a fool. Sat with that for a long time. The anger didn't come all at once. arrived like a low tide, creeping up the shore until the soles of my feet were wet. And when it reached my knees, I stood up. I walked to the hallway closet, pulled down the fireproof box again. Inside Marlene's journals. Not all of them, just the ones from her final years. She'd stopped writing toward the end, but before that she'd written plenty. I flipped through pages. Entries about her illness, about me, about how she wanted her estate handled. About her decision to keep the old will intact. Her handwriting was strong, her sentences were clear, no confusion, no fog. I made copies of the most relevant entries, took them to the print shop the next morning, bound them, labeled them. When I mailed them to Harold, I included a note. If they want proof of her mind, give them her words. I didn't wait for Randall to call. Didn't care if he did. I'd stopped explaining myself years ago. I'd just forgotten to act like it. The bank, they offered me coffee. That was new. The woman behind the desk, Dana, polite, efficient, young enough to be one of Claire's friends, called me Mrs. Delacroix with careful respect. Not because I asked her to, because Harold had called ahead. I have the paperwork. Here, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. It authorizes the transfer of all account holdings into your name, fully separated from the previous estate structure. He nodded. And the trust, being set up as we speak. The funds will remain secure until you assign disbursement instructions. I signed one page, then another. My name on each line, my hand steady. I'd been afraid once of banks, of lawyers, of terms like irrevocable and power of attorney. I used to smile and nod while men explained things I already understood just to keep peace. Questions. Now I signed without apology. Dana handed me a folder. Anyone attempts to access the accounts, you'll be notified immediately. They won't, I said. But thank you. She smiled. Genuine. If more clients were like you, my job would be easy. I left with the folder. Under my arm, the sun high, the sidewalk warm under my shoes. Past two young men arguing on the corner, sharp voices, hands flying. And I didn't flinch. Once. I might have crossed the street, but not today. I walked past the grocery store where Derek and I used to buy fruit on Sundays. Past the park bench where I once watched Randall learn to ride a bike. Past the courthouse where Marlene and I signed our wills side by side, laughing like girls sneaking candy. None of those places felt heavy anymore. It just felt true. When I got home, the mail was already in the box. One envelope, handwritten. Trevor. Inside was a note. Brief, sincere. Ma told Randall I'm not joining the lawsuit. He didn't take it well. Said some things I won't repeat. But I'm not backing down. I'll pay back what I owe you, even if it takes 10 years. Hope one day you'll believe I mean that. I sat at the kitchen table with a letter in my lap, breathing in its weight. He'd made a choice, a real one. Not perfect, but brave. That night I went to my closet and pulled down a different box. One that held the beginnings of my own affairs. Bank documents, insurance forms, a draft of my will, still incomplete. I sat on the floor, papers spread around me like a map. For once, I didn't feel overwhelmed. Felt steady. And that's when I started writing. Not just the legal language, though. I included all that clear and firm, but more a letter. To be opened after I'm gone. To Claire, to explain what was hers and why. Tell her she reminded me what family could feel like without demand or debt or weight. To tell her that I chose her. Not because she was perfect, but because she was present. And to thank her quietly for coming back. Every time when others walked away. I wrote the final line just before midnight. You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. The right to decide how my life ends. Not in silence, but in peace. I sealed it, filed it, and went to bed with no noise in my chest, no ache in my bones, just quiet. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. The kind that stays. I heard the knock before I saw the car. 3 short raps, not urgent but certain. When I opened the door, Randall was standing there. No suit this time, no briefcase, just a windbreaker, jeans, and a look I hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager caught in a lie. He didn't ask to come in. But figured I'd try one last time, he said. I said nothing. Let him fill the silence. I know you're angry. Do you? Yes. He looked down, then up again. I've been thinking about what Trevor said, about what you said about Marlene. Still, I said nothing. I know I handled things badly. Badly. What a careful little word. Like knocking over a glass of water. Not betrayal, not disrespect. Just badly. I was trying to protect the estate, he continued. I thought. You thought she didn't know her own mind. Cut in. Thought she couldn't possibly have made a decision without consulting you. His jaw clenched. She was slipping. Mom, you. No, she was. She was, and she still had more clarity than you did. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I stepped onto the porch, closed the door behind me, so we stood outside, exposed to the wind. I didn't want his presence clinging to the walls of my home. I have nothing left to give you, I said. And I won't pretend to respect someone who tried to strip dignity from the dead just to get paid. You think I'm some kind of monster. No, I think you're a boy who never learned how to lose. That hit. He didn't speak. Just looked out at the yard where the wind had scattered dogwood petals across the steps like confetti. I used to admire you, I said, quieter. Oh. Not because you were successful, but because you made things happen. Had drive, focus, charm. He nodded, still not looking at me. But somewhere along the way you started believing you were owed. That success meant you couldn't be challenged. That anything outside your plan was a mistake to be corrected. I was scared, he said. When Dad died, we all were scared. He looked at me finally. So what now? You never speak to me again. I'm speaking now, I said, but I'm not going to reward your behavior with comfort. He exhaled. You're really going to leave it all to Claire. Some of it. The rest is going to causes that mattered to Marlene. The library, the children's shelter, places that gave more than they took. He rubbed his hands together, cold now. And I guess this is it. Yes, I said. And it was. He turned, walked down the steps, got into his car. No yelling, no slamming, just a slow pull away from the curb. I stayed on the porch long after. He was gone. The wind quieted. The light shifted. I sat on the bench Derek built and watched a squirrel dart across the lawn, unaware of the century of life echoing around it. I didn't feel triumphant. Felt clean. There's a kind of grief that comes after clarity. Not the grief of loss, but of letting go of what never really belonged to you. Expectations, illusions, roles you played so long you forgot they weren't yours to begin with. I wasn't just their mother. I was a woman, a sister, a teacher, a keeper of promises. And I had one more promise to keep to myself. No more shrinking. No more smoothing over. Not even for blood. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I'd only seen it once before years ago when I was called for jury duty. Back then it had felt grand, intimidating. All wood paneling and polished railings. Place built to make people feel small. But today it didn't feel that way. Not to me. Harold sat beside me, calm, composed. He'd brought copies of everything. The 2008 will, the notarized statements, Marlene's journal pages, even a photograph of the two of us signing the document at the county office. Randall sat at the other table alone. His lawyer had called in sick, or so the clerk whispered. I didn't believe it. I think the man simply saw the writing on the wall and chose not to stain his name, chasing a ghost of a claim. The judge was a woman, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with no patience for performance. She read through the case file, asked Harold 2 questions, then turned to Randall. You've submitted a claim contesting the validity of a 2008 will. Correct. Randall stood. Yes, Your Honor. On what grounds? I believe my aunt was no longer of sound mind when she signed the document. Harold didn't flinch. He simply handed the judge a folder. In that folder, he said, you'll find multiple documents confirming the decedent's mental capacity at the time of signing, including her own writing, verified by a handwriting analyst, and testimony from her physician dated the same month. The judge flipped through it silently. Then she looked up at Randall. Do you have any documentation to the contrary? Randall shifted. No, Your Honor, but then this is hearsay and speculation. We don't run courtrooms on either. He opened his mouth again, but she raised a hand. I've seen enough, she. There is no merit to this contest. The will stands as written. Motion. Dismissed. Just like that, she struck the gavel once, short and final. Harold leaned toward me and whispered, It's over. I nodded, not because I didn't believe him, but because I'd already known. Randall walked out without looking at me. I watched him go, not with hate, just distance, like watching a stranger leave a room I no longer had to sit in. Outside, the sun was sharp on the sidewalk. Harold offered to drive me home, but I declined. I wanted to walk. I walked through the square, past the old cafe where Derek proposed to me over burnt pie and strong coffee, past the bus stop where Trevor used to wait with his lunchbox swinging from his hand, past the bookstore where Marlene once bought me a second-hand cookbook I never used. Everything looked the same, and nothing did. At home, I changed into my softest sweater, put the kettle on, and sat at the window. Claire would be coming by soon. She always did on Fridays. Pictured her. Left. The way she curled her feet under her when she sat. The way she listened like it was an art. I had one final envelope to give her. Not for money, not for property, for understanding. Inside were 3 pages. My handwriting, careful and deliberate. This is not a reward. This is recognition. You showed up. You stayed. You asked nothing and gave much. I wanted you to know that even in a room full of people I raised, you made me feel seen. One day you may be standing where I am now, looking back instead of forward. If that day comes, I want you to remember this. You owe no one your silence. Not for peace, not for family, not for love. He sealed it, placed it on the mantel. Let it wait. Claire arrived just before sunset. She always did. Like clockwork, like habit, like love that didn't need explaining. I had the tea already steeped. The lemon squares were hers this time. Better than mine, if I'm being honest. She brought them in a plain tin and set them down without ceremony, as if showing up was nothing special. It was everything. We talked, but not much. Told me about a new librarian at work who whispered instead of speaking. Told her about the neighbor's dog digging up my tulips again. Ordinary things, good things. Then I handed her envelope. She blinked. What's this? Just words, I said, but ones I want you to have. She didn't open it. Just held it like it mattered. That was enough. I think I'm done now, I said softly. With what? With waiting for something. That was never coming. She looked at me. That gaze of hers that sees more than it. You're not angry anymore. No, I said I'm not. I'm something better. She smiled, and for a moment I saw Marlene in her again. The way her eyes, priest, the way her face softened when she felt understood. We finished our tea. Watched the sun dip behind the fence. When she left, she hugged me longer than usual. And then I was alone, but not lonely. The house held a different quiet now. Not the silence of absence, but the hush of completion. Everything had a place again. The papers filed, the words said, the boundaries drawn, the love, the real love left standing clear and upright. Think a lot these days about what we leave behind. Not just money, not just things, but truth and memory and choice. There was a time when I believed my silence was a kindness, that not rocking the boat was my role, that being good meant being agreeable, pleasant, invisible. I don't believe that anymore. I believe in decency, yes, but not at the cost of self. I believe in family, too, but not the kind that only remembers you when there's something to inherit. And I believe in love deeply, but I no longer mistake it for obligation. If you've read this far, maybe you understand. Maybe you've sat across from people who used to make you feel safe and realize they no longer see you as whole. Maybe you've been the giver too long, the forgiver, the one who stepped back so others could step forward. If you have, I hope you know you can stop. You can say no. Can say enough. You can protect the parts of yourself you used to hand out freely. And you don't have to apologize for doing it late, only for never doing it at all. So, if this story meant something to you, if you saw yourself in these pages, let it be a quiet reminder that your voice still matters. And if you're ready to use it, even gently, I hope you'll leave a comment or share this with someone who needs to remember they're not alone. You're not. Not now. Not anymore. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family, as we are looking forward to hit our first 10,000 subscribers target, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You matter, your voice does too.